All right, so we'll say good morning. Today's daf is Ayin Dalit 74. We are going to pick off on Ayin Gimel Amud Beis. Again, incredible stories. I'm giving it to you with the caveat that we are. I'm not going to do these stories justice, as I've already said to you yesterday, but I'm going to give you hopefully a little bit snippets. And the good thing is, you could always go back. And I want to be clear: when we finish the blot in Shir, does not mean you have to finish the blot. There's absolutely meaning. Feel free to go back, right? And of course, and again, Yom Tiv's coming. Fold down these pages. These are beautiful pages. They're beautiful dapim to review every Yom Tiv as well. This Agarata is rich with incredible and beautiful lessons, which again, I'm not doing justice to. So I'm putting the achrayas on you to really go back and ayin a bit more. So let's begin. 73b, Ayin Beis, Amud Beis, 6 lines up from the bottom. Amar Rabbi Rachana. So Rabbi Rachana is the major character. Not character, the major personality that we are dealing with over here. So Rabbi Rachana said the following. One time I was walking in the desert and we were accompanied by an Arab. Taya means like an Arab merchant. That wherever we went, the Arab would pick up the dirt and he would smell the dirt. Both say through smelling the dirt, he was able to see where exactly we were and able to tell us which direction to go in. We asked him, tell us, how far are we from water? And he said, give me a handful of dirt, I'll smell it and I'll tell you how far you are from water. We gave it to him. Timni Parsi. He said, we're 8 parselos away. So a little while later we did this again. We're only 3 parselos away from water now. So Rabbi Rachana said, I tried to trick him by giving him different dirt, and he was unable to go ahead, and we were unable to trick him. In other words, that this Arab really, he knew his malacha, ultimately again about how from the smell of the dirt to be able to go ahead and determine which direction and how close to water. So as this Arab was leading us through the desert, he said to me, Ta'achli l'chamese midbar. Azli chazazinu. So we'll say, so the Arab said to me, do you want to see the Jews who died in the desert? So what this is specifically referring to over here is the Dor HaMidbar, the Jews who died out in the desert as a result of the sin of the Meraglim. So the Arab merchant said to me, do you want to see their bodies? So what happens? So he took me, Azli chazasinu v'damu kiman demivsimi. So Rabbi Rachana said, I saw them, and they looked like they were intoxicated, which I will say bepashtus means that their bodies were preserved. In other words, they had a shining facial complexion, almost like when a person drinks, so they get a little red. So ultimately, again, they had almost like a healthy like complexion, which indicates that the bodies were preserved. Top of Ayin Dalid, v'ganu aparkid, and they were lying down on their backs. So I'll just point out over here. So the Yaros Dash B'Yonas and Aibish, it says over here, what's the meaning that they were gonna aparkid, that they were sleeping on their backs? First of all, I just want to point out to you, which again is not our topic for today, but dramatically enough, these sugyas, some of the halachos or some of the minhagim concerning burial practices, ultimately come from this particular Gemara, the Shulchan Aruch, the Nosei Kelim, quote this Gemara specifically again, the notion of burying a mace on its back, that they buried the dead on their back. Ultimately, again, according to some, one of the sources is Gemara, which is quite dramatic that we're learning it out from Maisalach like this. In any event, Yaros Devash says that what does it mean that ultimately they were sleeping on their back? See, he says so beautifully. He says, "L'rames shechatam lo haya davar pashat shrat v'acharei hachomer ela sha'alu b'madrega yosim edai b'kalas nafshem el Hashem." That the sin of the Dor HaMidbar, Abosai, was really much more, not that they were rebelling against God, but ultimately, again, their sin was spiritually motivated. The Netziv has this yesod as well. Why did Klal Yisrael not want to go into Eretz Yisrael? So Rabbi Yonas and Aibishitz, the Netziv, all really highlight the same yesod, which is that at the end of the day, they very much enjoyed the spiritual connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu they had in the Midbar. They enjoyed the Man, they enjoyed the Anan, they enjoyed the Eish, and they recognized that when they went into Eretz Yisrael, all of that would have to dramatically change. They did not want that change. They did not want that, what we'll call, normal lifestyle. They enjoyed that level of spiritual connection. Says Yaros Dash, that's the symbolism that they were lying on their backs, looking upwards, that their chait was actually a desire to remain closer and not have to transition into the normal framework of this world. What happens? So we'll say, so one of the bodies, right, the leg was bent, and the knee was extended. So it says the Gemara, and the Arab merchant rode through underneath the knee of the mace, while he was sitting on his camel, and ultimately his spear was extended up, and ultimately again he didn't even touch the mace, representing ultimately again, literally, the incredible size of the bodies. That here again, one mace has his leg bent, and the Arab on his camel with his spear extended is able to go under it without even touching the knee. Again, the Aras Tavash brings down, same yisod, the metaphor is the greatness of these individuals. Although they sinned, and they sinned terribly, the level of ruchnius they were on is unparalleled. So the Gemara goes weiter. So, Rabbi Achana says, I cut off the corner of the tzitzis, literally the corner of the tcheles of one of the bodies. And after I did that, our animals were unable to move. Now ultimately we will see one of the reasons why Rabbi Bachana cut off the corner of the tzitzis, that Rashbam points out over here, is to bring it back to the Beis Medrash and to try to decide who is right between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. There's a fundamental machlokes about tzitzis. Is tzitzis 3 bent over strings or 4 bent over strings? So Hillel says 3, Beis Hillel says 3, Beis Shammai says 4. So Rabbi Rachana says, I have an incredible opportunity here. It's one of the situations where we pass like Beis Shammai. I have an incredible opportunity here to bring back the corner of the tzitzis to the Beis Medrash, mamash from the midbar, and see who the halacha follows. But after he cut off the corner, the animals they were riding were unable to move. Amrli, so my Arab guide said to me, Dilma shakalis midi minahu. Perhaps you took something off one of the corpses. Ahadre, you have to return it. Digimiri, because we know demand the shakal midi minayu lo mistagile. Because the Arab, apparently, I will say, the Rabbi Achana was not the first person to try to take something, right? So we know every time you try to take something, the Arab says, I bring groups here all the time, and every time we try to take something, ultimately again the animals can't move. We'll say the Yaros Devash again comments over here and says, because the Gzeira on the Dor Hamidbar was that what? They were to remain in the midbar. Nothing of theirs could be removed from the midbar. So every time you take something, you remain rooted in place. Just says I put back the tzitzis, and ultimately again the animals were able to move forward. So when he came to the Beis Medrash, and I told him about everything that happened, and I told him, I had the tzitzis, but I don't have the tzitzis. So the rabbis didn't have kind words to him. Amruli, they said to me, Kol Abba Chamra. Every Abba, now both say, remember, Rabba Bar Chana is actually Rabbi Abba. Rabba is a contraction for Rabbi Abba. They said every Abba is like a donkey. V'chol Bar Chana sichsa, and every Bar Chana is a fool. In other words, what they said to him is, you foolish man. Why did you take the tzitzis to begin with? Because you want to know, does halacha follow Beis Shammai, or does the halacha follow Beis Hillel? Is it 4 like Beis Shammai, meaning 4 bent over strings, which come out to 8 on the bottom? Or is it 3 like Beis Hillel? So I don't understand. Okay, you couldn't take you don't need to take the tzitzis. What did you need to do? Just count the strings and count the knots. That's all we needed, and you lost out on this incredible opportunity. Amarle. So I'll say the Maisa goes on. Ta'achvi lecha Har Sinai. So let's listen to this. So the Arab guide says to Rabbi Rachana, would you like to see Har Sinai? So Rabbi Rachana says, sure. Azli chazai the hadre akraba v'kaima ki chamri chivarti. So they came to Har Sinai. What did they say? So they saw that Har Sinai was surrounded by scorpions that had the appearance of white donkeys. So the Gemara says, Shamis Baskol, I heard a Baskol that said, Shomeres oili shenishbati. So woe to me that I have sworn. Va'achshav shenishbati mi meferli. And now that I have sworn, who could annul my oath? We'll say, take a look at the Rashbam for just a moment. Shenishbati min agalos. K'dichsiv krai tov v'navim. The Rebbe Shalom is saying, woe to me that I have sworn that my children must be exiled. Woe to me that my children must be exiled. And because I, God, made a vow, I'm stuck. Who could annul this vow for me? I will say, just interestingly enough, Why is it that the Ribono Shel Olam? So again, we see the other Gemaras in Brachas like this as well. The Ribono Shel Olam daily or laments daily that He has had to exile us. Why Dafka is this Baskal coming from Har Sinai? Because if you think about it, Har Sinai was the place of the greatest demonstration of love for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's the makom of Na'aseh and Nishma. It's the place of blind faith. But it's not just blind faith and blind obedience. It's blind love. And therefore, again, it's at this makom where we professed our love for HaKadosh Baruch Hu that the Ribono Shel Olam laments, look what I've done. Look what I've done. And who could reverse this oath for me? So what happens? So Rabbi Rachana comes back to the Rabbanon. He tells them what he saw. Amrulei, they said to me, Kol Abba Chamra, Kol Bar Chana Sichsan. Again, they didn't have the kindest words from you, fool. Have lecha lomar, meifar lecha. You should have said, Ribono Shel Olam, I annul it for you, right? I annul your vow. I, Rabbi Bar Chana, will say the halacha is that although you normally need a beis din, right? If you have a yachid mumche, if you have an individual again who's an expert, that individual can be made for us. We should, Rabbi Bar Chana, you should say Ribono Shel Olam, right? Mutu lecha, mutu lecha, mutu lecha. So the Gemara said, "Who's sava?" Right? Why didn't Rabbi Bar Chana do it? Because he thought Dilma shvu asa de mabulhu. He thought maybe it was the shvu of the mabul. He thought maybe again it was the oath. Ultimately, again, the oath not to destroy the world, and therefore again he thought maybe HaKadosh Baruch Hu was lamenting his incredible displeasure with humanity, and he was looking for someone to be made for the neder of not destroying the world. So Rabbi Rachana said, I'm not going to do that. So the Gemara says, Im kain. So the Rabbanan said, there can't be oily lama. Why does the Ribono Shel Olam use lashon of oily? Woe to me. Obviously the Ribono Shel Olam was talking about his vow to go ahead and be Golek Klal Yisrael. Amrlei, ta'achli lecha b'loi dekorach. So he said to me, so now the Arab guide is taking me, and he said, do you want to see those who were swallowed up in the rebellion of Korach? So chazoy trey busy, v'havo kamafke kutra. So we came to a place where there were two cracks in the earth, and from the two cracks were coming two pillars of smoke. Shakol gavava da'amra, va'amshina b'maya. So what happens? My Arab guide took two tufts of wool, immersed it in water, udatsisa berosha de rumcha, and he went and he attached it to the tip of a spear, va'ayli hasam, and he put the two soaking tufts of wool into the cracks. V'chi apik, and when ultimately he took it out, have ichrich ichruchi, the wool was singed. So I obviously see how hot that was if it's singed, soaking wet wool. Amrli atzis. My shamis, so my guide said to me, the Arab guide said to me, listen, tell me if you listen, what do you hear? V'shamis tava amrin Moshe v'saraso emes v'hin badoin. And Moshe said, we kept hearing that what? So Rabbi Arab Bachar said, we kept hearing voices from the cracks that said, Moshe's emes, his Torah's emes, and we are liars, or we are false. Amrali, the merchant said to me, called Tlasin Yomin, Mahaduluhu Gehenna Mahacha. Every 30 days, ultimately, again, Gehenna circles here. Again, whatever this means. But Gehenna revolves. Ki Basra bekalachas, like a pot that is being stirred. Va'amri hachi, and the voices of both say this refers ultimately again to Korach's sons. The Rashbam points out that Korach's sons did tshuva, right, as they were being swallowed up. And as a result of their tshuva, they did not have to descend to the lowest depths of Gehenna, but rather, again, they occupy a higher level of Gehenna. But Gehenna nevertheless. And every 30 days, says the guide, you could hear their voices emerging from Gehenna. He says, Va'amri hachi, and they always say the same thing. Moshe v'saraso emes v'hein badoin. Moshe and his Torah are truth, and they hein, which means they, but a reference to them, are liars. Amrli, sa'ach li l'cha heicha denashki ara v'rakia ahadadi. Next, the guide said to me, Rabbi Rachana says, would you like to see the place where heaven and earth kiss? Literally, where heaven and earth come together. So I'll tell you something very beautiful. So Ahadri, let's read the Ma'aseh and I'll tell you the meaning. So what happens? So Ahadri, shaklisu l'silsa anchasa b'kavra dirakia. So what happens? So take a look at the Rashbam. The Rashbam says, Haicha denashki ara v'rakia, makam gavoa hayasham shenoshkin yachad zelazeh. V'lav hainu sofa olam. So again, he says it's a place where literally heaven and earth kiss each other. So what happens? Rabbi Rachana says, shaklisa l'silsai. He took his basket, sal lechem shali, his bread basket. You know, you're not going to go on Jews don't go on a trip without food. So what happens? So he has his basket with his bread. And chasa b'kavsa dirakia. He placed it in one of the windows of the rakia. So he's in this place where heaven and earth meet. And apparently, again, it's made up of a series of windows. He places his bread basket in one of the windows. Adamatzilna, then he went to daven. So Adamatzilna ba'isi v'lo ashkeche. When he came back, he went to daven, he came back, and what? The bread basket wasn't there. So Rabbi Chana says to the Arab, Aminale, Igagan v'yacha, are there thieves that come to this place? Amar li, hai gilgula dirakiyahu. He said, no, do not worry. He said, this is the Gilgul of the Rakia. This is where the Rakia turns. Don't worry, the Rakia is simply revolving, but if you come back to the same place tomorrow, your bread basket will be here. So what's the pshat? What does this mean? So in the Sefer Siduro Shel Shabbos, first of all, I should say something interesting. The Siduro Shel Shabbos brings down an incredible yisod, which is that any time that the Gemara discusses Taya, so the Zohar brings down that Taya is a reference to Eliyahu Hanavi. So listen to this. He says something amazing. He says, so beautiful, and actually ties into what we're learning in Gan as well. So Eliyahu was saying to Rabbi Rachana, do you want to see how the Ara and the Rakia, the Nashki Ara Rakia, the job of the Jew is to have the earth and the heavens kiss. The job of the Jew is to make sure that my Gashmius becomes Ruchnius as well. It's important that, again, I don't have two things in my life, the material and the spiritual, but rather, again, I have to try to go ahead and elevate my material as well, to the point that my material, the Ara, is able to be no shake, is able to ultimately, again, is able to kiss the heavens as well. Let's listen to this, how beautiful this is. Good morning, Mr. Shonfeld. So what does Rabbi Rachana do? Rabbi Rachana takes his bread basket and he puts it in the window of Shamayim. As if to say, a Jew is able to take his bread basket, a Jew is able to take his lechem, and if used correctly, and if earned correctly, and if understood correctly, ultimately, again, doesn't even have to be a part of this world, but could become a part of the windows of Shamayim. An incredible yisod of how the Jew has to somehow marry his Gashmius together with his Ruchni. It's incredible. So the Gemara goes right there. Rabbi Yochanan used to say, Zimna chada hava kazuna b'sefin. The one time I was traveling by boat, v'chazina ukura da'afke l'reish shemi yama, and we saw a fish that raised its head out of the sea. V'damyon eine kesisre sihiri, and its eyes looked like two moons. V'nafut tzmaya mitre zime kitre mavri desura, and water came out of its nostrils, mamish like the two rivers of Surah. Rav Safra Mishtay Zimna, Rav Safra used to say, Zimna Chada, Hava Kazina B'Sefinta. We'll say, there's an incredible metaphor, by the way. You see a lot of these stories happen to revolve around fish and seas. We'll say, so that has to do a lot, because remember, again, this ties back very much in the Gemara B'Seches Menachos, where the Gemara says, Tcheles dome liyam, yam dome l'rakia, rakia dome l'kisya kavod. Tcheles resembles the sea resembles the shamayim resembles the kisya kavod, and ultimately, again, the kisya kavod as Mirames takes us to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The vastness of the sea, the blueness of the sea, is a constant ongoing metaphor for Ruchnius. So what they're also perceiving over here is in the vastness of the sea. And again, it could also be literally they're seeing sea creatures. Whatever they're seeing, it could be a bit of hyperbole in describing them. But the idea is they're in the seas and they're seeing these incredible creations that they don't obviously normally see on the land. And it's giving them an insight into the vastness and greatness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Rav Safra said the following, so Rav Safra says, one time we were traveling by sea, we saw this sea creature, it poked its head out of the sea, and we saw that it had horns. And engraved on the horns is Ana Beria Kalo Shaviyam Vavina Tlasmi Aparsa. And it said again on the horns, I am a small creature in the sea, and this creature itself was 300 parsos. Vazilna Lapuma de Levyasan, and I saw this creature swim right into the mouth of the Levyasan. Amar Ravashi, Hahu Iza Diyamahu. This sea creature, this fish that you saw, it's called the sea goat. a sea goat, right? The Iza Diyama, Hu de Bechisha Ve'isle Karne. Ultimately, not like the sea dog. The mamish like a different, this is a new attraction in the harbor. But again, Hu Iza Diyama Hu de Bechisha Ve'isle Karne. Ultimately, again, the way it gets food is it takes its horns and it stirs up the seabed. Rabbi Yochanan used to say, Zim nechad hava chazina b'sinto. One time I was traveling by boat. V'chazinon ha'u kartalisa dahavu mekavi be'avanim tovos umar golios. So it says, and I saw that there was a chest that had in it precious stones. V'hadri le mine dekavri de mikva karsha, and it was surrounded by fish, right, that are called karsha fish. Okay? Nochis bar, Amadez will say, Nochis bar amoroi, la'asuye. So I will say, what happens? A diver went in. It's interesting. The Aramaic word for a diver is amoroi. Look at the Rashbam. Adam sheodea lashut b'mayim. This is a person who knows how to swim. Not just knows how to swim, he knows how to dive. So the diver went in to retrieve the chest. The ragash, what happens? The fish felt the presence of the diver. And the fish wanted to bite off the diver's leg. The diver apparently also is carrying with him a skin of vinegar. So interestingly enough, what's the pshat with vinegar? Apparently vinegar, the scent of vinegar, which is perceptible by the fish, ultimately again drives away the fish. So he threw at them a thing of vinegar, the smell chased them away. He saved his life. Nafak Baskal of Amra. So the Baskal came out and said, "My isluchu bahadi kartalisa de divisa Rav Chana Bardosa." What do you have to do with this chest? That is the possession of the wife of Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa. This chest is going to hold ultimately again the tcheles for the tzaddikim in the world to come. We'll say, so what's the metaphor over here? Remember, Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa is the Maisa that we learned in the Gemara. Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa is for exceptionally poor. What happened? Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa, remember this famous Maisa, he davened, and what happens? A golden leg of a table came down, and his wife urged him to daven that it be taken back. Because that golden leg, where did it come from? It came from his table in Olam Haba. And she urged him to say, don't take your schar for Olam Haba in Olam Hazeh. An exceptionally righteous woman. So the metaphor over here in this story is that this is a reference to the fact that this chest represents the schar of tzaddikim in Olam Hazeh. And I will say, Olam Haba. And what's going to happen? Many are going to try to dive and retrieve this schar, this reward for themselves. But the Baskal says, I'm sorry, that schar is not for you. That schar is reserved for the tzaddikim. So the message of the story ultimately being the incredible reward that is reserved for the tzaddikim, but again, can be accessed by the tzaddikim as well. Rabbi Huda Hindua, Mishtari. Rabbi Huda Hindua told over the following idea. Zimna chada, hava kazin lebesindu. One time I was traveling by boat. V'chazina hahu even tava. Let's listen to this. Dava hadir blatanina. I will say again, like I said, I can't tell you enough. There's so much more to these dramatic stories, so much deeper meaning. But again, we'll just enjoy them. So Rabbi Yehuda Hindua one time I was traveling in the boat. Hava chazina even tava. The hava hadir la tanina. So let's say, so what happens? There was we were once traveling by boat, and we saw a precious stone that ultimately again was being guarded by a particular sea creature. So a diver went down to retrieve the stone. What happens? The diver was successful. The diver retrieved the stone. The stone is now on board, right? The stone is now on the boat. So what happens? The sea creature that was guarding the stone wanted to now swallow up the boat. Asa pishkansa. Supposed to remember our pishkansa yesterday? Pishkansa is the female raven. A pishkansa came along, swooped down, paske l'reishe, chopped off the head or bit off the head of the sea creature. Asfichu maya v'havadama. Supposed to say there was so much blood that was gushing out of the sea creature that literally the water didn't look like water, the water looked like blood. So what happens? So asa tanina chavre, shakle, v'talyale, v'chaya. So let's say what happens? The other sea creature in the interim retrieved the stone. There was another sea creature, retrieved the stone from the boat, put the stone around the neck of the decapitated sea creature, and that sea creature came back to life. Asa kabai ba l'sinta. We'll say first white line, ayin dalat amad beis. So as I say, so ultimately again, the first sea creature came back to life. Hadar asat sifra paskel reshay. So we'll say now what happens? The sea creature wanted again to swallow up the boat. So asat safira paskel reshay. Ultimately again the bird came along and decapitated the sea creature. Shaklua lahi eventava. So we'll say, so what happened? So now Shajur the Sinta. So what happened? After again, now the bird came down and once again saved the boat. So the precious stone was thrown on board the boat. Havahanit Sipiri Malichi Bahadan. So let's listen to this. Remember again, this is Rabbi Yehuda telling this story. We had some salted birds on board. Right? Salted birds on board. I will say, and we had them ultimately again for food purposes. What happens? Osvinu alayhu. So we wanted to see the power of this stone. We placed the stone upon the salted birds, and what happens? The birds came back to life and started going ahead and flying around. They both say, incredible. On the flip side, no lunch. Right? So it's a trade-off. Incredible event. They both say, so again, remember, obviously, I'll just point out to you, I'll just say one thing on this. The Ben Yehoyada brings down all of these stories about the treasure, about the chest of jewels, about the precious stones. Anytime that, in general, anytime you see stories, these metaphorical stories about precious stones, is always a reference to the schar of Olam Haba. And ultimately, again, the constant tension you see with the divers trying to get it is this struggle for, on one hand, the desire. See what I say? What's the whole chap? What's the allure of buried treasure? What's the allure of it? Instantaneous wealth without a lot of effort. Right? So we'll say, isn't that at the end of the day the ultimate dream? I want all of the benefits. I want the treasure chest. I just want someone to give me the map. I'm happy to dive down for it. I'm happy to dig for it. I just don't want to really have to earn it. That's the metaphor in this. I see the treasure. I want the treasure. Diver, do me a favor. I'm not diving. I'm not diving. But I have a guy, right? I have a guy who dives, right? So I'm going to outsource. Do me a favor. Go get the treasure chest for me. Bring it back. Go get the jewel and bring it back. So we'll say, essentially, we want all of the reward, but we don't want the effort. And the point that the Gemara is making for me over here is that when I try to get the reward, but I don't want to put in the effort, it's not sustainable. I'm not going to have it. The treasure chest will remain out of reach. The jewel will remain out of reach. Tan Rabbanan. Say, let's go back to Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shakol niyeh b'dvaro. Third line in the wide lines. Tan Rabbanan. Maaseh Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yoshua, shayu ba'in b'sina. Let's listen to this. One time, Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yoshua were traveling together by boat. Rabbi Eliezer Yashin. Rabbi Eliezer was asleep. Rabbi Yeshua was awake. Nizdazer Rabbi Yeshua b'nin Rabbi Eliezer. So Rabbi Yeshua, Nizdazer Rabbi Yeshua. So Rabbi Yeshua literally was startled, and as a result, b'nin Rabbi Eliezer, he woke up Rabbi Eliezer. So however he was startled, his startled state woke up Rabbi Eliezer. Olei, mazi Yeshua, mepnei mazi Nizdazata. What's wrong, Yeshua? Why did you get all startled and you woke me up? Rabbi Yeshua responds, Ma'or gadol ra'isi bayam. I saw a great light in the water. Amar lo, Shema Einav Shalev Yasan Ra'isa. Maybe you saw, ultimately again, maybe you saw the eyes of the Lev Yasan. Dechsev Einav Ke'af Apav Shachar. Because the eyes of the Lev Yasan, I will say, are compared to the dawning sun. Amar Rav Ashi, so I will say, just so you should know, it's an incredible use as well. The Arizal comments on this Gemara. And he says, that there are times in life where even when we're sleeping, we see something that's nizdazea. We see something that awakens us. What is it that awakens us? Sometimes it's the eyes of the Lev Yasan. Sometimes it's the eyes of Mashiach. It's the eyes of the Geula. That's when you sometimes get a little bit of a glimpse of Mashiach. You get a little bit of a glimpse of the Geula. It's enough to wake you up, even from the deepest of slumbers. An incredible idea. Amar Rav Ashi, Amar Lihuna bar Nasan, Zimna Chadava Kazilna Lamidbara. One time I was traveling in the desert. V'have amta de Basra bahadan pasachna v'nachrina v'anchana esvi. We wanted to roast a piece of meat. So what did we do? We cut up the piece of meat. So they had like a whole side of an animal over here. They opened up, like a thigh. They opened up the thigh of the animal, and they were doing nikr, right? They were removing the giranosha. So removing the giranosha, they were removing all the forbidden fats, and then they put v'anchas asvoi. We put herbs. We put herbs on the meat before we roast it to allow the herbs to go ahead and seep into the meat. Adamaisina and Sivi. So we'll say now the next part was we had to retrieve wood in order to go ahead and roast the meat. So when we came back from getting back the wood, cholam atma, the meat closed back up. So we'll say, interestingly enough, something happened with the herbs. The meat was cut open that caused the piece to close up again, which again didn't impact their meal plans. It was just something interesting. So what happens? The tavyan. We roasted the meat. 12 months later we came back, ultimately again, to the same place. And chazinu lahano gumri dava kamalachshi. And we saw that the coals that we had used were still burning. When we came back before Meimar, we told them this story. Amrli, hahu isva samsari hava. The herb that you used is called the samsa herb. Apparently the samsa herb has the ability, it has a curative impact. What's the curative impact? That if you get a cut and you apply the samsa herb, what does it do? It closes the wound. So when they put it on this piece of meat, what it did was it closed up the piece of meat. So I know gumri, these coals are derisma. The coals ultimately again were of rosem wood. Rosem wood apparently burns for a very long time. Kiasite, fine. Fine. Hano gomri derisma havu. Vayivra lakim esataninim agdolim. So we'll say the Gemara now dashes the pasuk. The Rebbe created the great sea creatures. Hacher targimu arziloi diyama. So we'll say here we refer to these sea creatures as arziloi of the sea. So if you look at the Rashbam, he says over here, arziloi diyama re'imim shabam, also known as the re'im of the sea. Okay, Rabbi Yochanan says, Ze levyasan nachish beriach, v'levyasan nachish akalson. So Rabbi Yochanan says this refers to the two sea creatures. So we'll say one of them is known as the levyasan, the straight snake, and the levyasan, the bent snake. Which I will say refers ultimately again, the straight snake refers to the male levyasan, the bent snake refers to the female levyasan. Shnei Amar, Bayomahu Yifkov Hashem Becharbo Akasha. Amar Yudam Rav, Kol Ma Shivara Kadosh Baruch Hu Ba'olamo, Zachon Nekev Baram. So Rabbi Yehuda says, whatever God created in this world, He created male and female. So the Gemara says, where do we know this from? So Af Levyasan Nachash B'riya Levyasan Nachash Alakson Zachon Nekeva Baram. So to the Levyasan, the Rebbe Shalom created the Levyasan, and one was, we'll say the Gemara refers to the Levyasan as Nachash B'riach, a straight snake, and a bent snake. It refers to it as a snake, because Rebbe say that's the Levyasan as a fish, as a serpent, as a sea creature. But again, it moves like a snake would move. And what happens? V'ilmale niskakin zelazeh. And ultimately, again, if they were to mate, machrivin kala olam kulo. The entire world would be destroyed. Others will say the world cannot sustain the Levyasan and its offspring. If it were to mate, again, ultimately, again, the world would be destroyed. Ma'asa Kadosh Baruch Hu. So what did the Rebbe Shalom do? Sires as hazachar, v'harag as hanakeva. The Rebbe Shalom went ahead. Sires as a zachar means literally he castrated the zachar. The zachar, the male, is incapable of fathering children or offspring. V'harages hanakeva, and he killed the nekeva. Umilcha l'tzadikim, and salted the nekeva, the female levyasan, for the seudas mashiach la'asadav. So we'll say the seudas mashiach la'asadav is going to be of the levyasan. Shnei Amar v'harag as hatanin asher bayam v'af Behemos Baharei Elef. So we'll say, so too, this other creature called the Behemos Baharei Elef. What's the chap with this Behemos Baharei? What is this? So we'll say, these are land creatures that eat the vegetation of 1,000 mountains per day. In other words, they consume an incredible amount. And therefore also, Zachur Nekev Baram, Bosham created the male and female, Ve'ilmali Niskakin Zelazem Achriven Eskala Olam Kulo. And we'll say, if they were to mate, they would destroy the entire world. Because again, I will say now, again, the Levyasan would destroy the entire world. How? By causing the waters to overflow. These animals would destroy the entire world by consuming all of the vegetation. Sama'a Sakadosh Baruch Hu. So what did the Rebbe Shalom do? He says, Sirius es hazachar, v'tzinin es hanakeva. He went ahead and he castrated the male. V'tzinin literally cooled down the female, so that she should not desire to mate. And ultimately, again, this zochar, this male animal, is going to be the su'uda for Mashiach. So we'll say, so far we see incredible 2 courses for the Sudas Mashiach. So apparently, again, we begin with the Lev Yasan, and ultimately, again, have this Behema Baharare Ela. Shneimar, Hinena Kocho, B'masnav, Zachar, V'ono, B'shrire Bet, Bitno, Zunekeva. Fine, so the Pasuk will say first to the male and female. Hasam Nami, Lissere, Lezachar, so why don't we say again by the also remember by the Behemos Bahare Elef, so the Baruch Hu castrated the male and he went and he cooled down the female. Why didn't he do the same thing by the Lev Yasan as well? Castrate the male and ultimately again cool down the female. Why did the Baruch Hu shech the female Lev Yasan? To which the Gemara says Dagim Pritzi, because again fish will mate with other fish, and therefore again even cooling down the female would not prevent procreation. So why not do the opposite? So we'll say, so again, so what he's asking about the Lev Yasan, why didn't he just go ahead and, why didn't he just kill the male? To which the Gemara answers, because apparently again by fish, the female ultimately again tastes better. So Nekeva Malicha Mali, Ibai Sema, Kevan Dechsev Lev Yasan Zayatar Telasachik Bo, Bahadi Nekeva Lav Orach Ara. So we'll say the Pasuk says in Tehillim that the Ribono Shalom created the Lev Yasan to play with it, right? To play with it. So we'll say, so had it been the female that was left over, it would be a lack of tznius. We'll say an incredible yisod that even the Ribono Shalom is makbid, ultimately again on maintaining a proper tsanua conduct. Even though none of this is to be understood literally, still it doesn't read right. So we'll say ultimately again, why not go ahead and by the behemos sadai, by the animal, why not shech the nekeva and salted, kavra malicha mali, bisra malicha lo mali. And we'll say salted fish is good, but ultimately again, salted meat is not as good. So we'll say, first I'll just point out over here, the Noam Elimelech. But I don't have time for it. There's a beautiful Noam Elimelech on the Lev Yasan, but we'll have to say it for a different time. Rabbi Yehuda. Amarav. So we'll say when the Ribono Shel Olam wanted to create the world, he said to the Malach in charge of the seas, Psach picha ubala kol mei mushabolam. Open your mouth and swallow up all the waters of the world. So we'll say what the Ribono Shel Olam is trying to do is, remember, in the beginning of creation, all of the world is covered with water. The Ribono Shel Olam wants to create earth. So he says to the Malach who controls the sea, I need you to open your mouth and to swallow more of the waters. I have enough problems swallowing again the waters as it is, just to keep the waters from becoming even greater. The Ribono Shel Olam does not do well with disobedience. And therefore what? He killed the Malach. Shene Emar, Bikocho Raga Hayam, Usfunoso Machatz Rav. Amar Bitzvot Shemamina, Saro Shayam Rahav Shmo. This angel of the sea, his name was Rav. V'amali Mayim Mechasinos. And I will say his body lies at the bottom of the seabed. Were it not that the waters cover his body, Ein Kol Beria Yechol Lamo Berecho. The stench of his decomposing body would be so intense that the world would not be able to endure. It's only because the waters cover it that ultimately again the smell is mashed. Lo yaru v'lo yashchisu b'chol har kodshi kemayim liyam mechasim al tikri liyam mechasim ella l'sara shayam mechasim. Fine, I will say don't read it as it covers the waters, rather it covers the saro shayam. V'amrav Yehuda, Amrav Yardin yotza mimaras pamyas. The Jordan River, its source is the cave of Pamyas. Tanya Melech that supports this. Yardin yotzi mimaras Pamyas umahalach biyama shal sitchi. So I'll say ultimately again the Yardin, the Jordan River, its source is the cave of Pamyas. And mahalech biyama shal sifchi, it flows into the river of Sifchi, ubiyama shal Tiberia, and it flows into the sea of Tiberia as well. Umeskalgil v'yori biyama hagadol, and it continues to trickle down until it enters into the Mediterranean. And the Mediterranean continues to flow until the Mediterranean enters into the mouth of the Lev Yasan. So I'll say, remember again, whenever you see discussions about Lev Yasan, that's always discussions about Moshiach. So you see what the Gemara is saying is that the water sources and their tributaries of Eretz Yisrael all lead into the mouth of the Lev Yasan, ultimately representing this idea, this incredible connection between Mashiach and Eretz Yisrael. Shnei Amar, Yiftach ki yagiach yardin al piyu, maskif la Rava bar Ula, Chai bebehemos bari elef ksiv. But one second, that pasuk that you just quoted, that speaks about the waters flowing into the mouth of the Leviathan, really speaks about the fact that the waters flow into the mouths of the Behemos Bahari Elef. Now, also remember again, those Behemos Bahari Elef are those large animals that consume a lot, that also one of them was killed, and ultimately again saved for the Mashiach. To which the Gemara says, when do the Behemos Paralef, when do they know that their existence is ensured? As long as the waters continue to flow into the mouth of the Leviathan. In other words, the Behemos Bahare Elef, they know they will continue to exist as long as what? As long as the Leviathan continues to exist as well. In other words, that as long as the Leviathan's existence is ensured, the Behemos Bahare Elef can exist as well. We'll stop over here for today. We'll pick up in Miras Hashem with Kiyas Rav Dimi tomorrow. Again, we have another, it's a big daf. We have another exciting daf in Miras Hashem tomorrow. We'll get started a little bit earlier to be able to accommodate it. Shkoyach.